It wasn't actually.
Oh,
If you're happier wearing them, do, because
no,
it
it's
doesn't
okay.
make any difference. In fact, I thought they looked pretty distinguished.
That'll be a first for me.
No, come on.
We're live. Hey, this is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it's always a treat to have our good friend Lee Goldberg with us. We're going to be talking about his brand new book, Movieland. And Lee, as always, kindly signed a bunch of books for us. Where is it? Well, you have to take my word for it. These are signed. I'll put
genuine Diet Coke stains in them too.
Yes.
So if you see the stains, that's Lee Goldberg Diet Coke from his desk.
And I'll put a link in the comments field if you'd like to purchase one of them. We're almost sold out of these. So, and if you have questions for Lee, go ahead and put them in. And Barbara usually summons me back on screen towards the end of the hour. And I'd be happy to ask any question you might have. So, Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So I have to say that Lee Goldberg is what I would describe as a protein writer. He's written all kinds of things. He's written scripts, he's written movies, he's written television, and he's written a bunch of books. And the most recent one is a series that he's written about Detective Lee Ronan, who I think is a really fascinating creation. This is book 4 in a series that I think it's gone Lost Hill, Bone Canyon, Gated Prey, and now Movieland. Do I have that right? Excellent.
I like the protein though. People also call me a protein writer since I'm on the keto diet and all I'm eating is meat now. I'm just a walking piece of bacon.
Wow. Well, I have to commend Lee because he's certainly trimmed down, which is not the case of many of us in the pandemic. So you look great.
Yeah, I look great. Now I've got nothing but fat in my veins. I mean, I'll probably die of a heart attack in the middle of this interview, but I'll look great dying. I'll be the best looking I've ever been.
Be careful not to have any open flames around you in case you torch. So, I was thinking before we started this, Lee, that we've been talking about names. Patrick is on a names kick. So he's asking questions about why do authors, how do they name their characters and why those particular names? And I was thinking that Ronin is such a good word, from the Japanese, the roving, masterless samurai.
Yeah.
That in his way is he's kind of like the Knights of the Round Table or whatever. And since Eve Ronin, I think, did you call her that because there's a kind of an echo of Ronin and Eve in the
absolutely.
Department?
She's a loner in middle of a giant bureaucracy where she's trying to fit in, but she's ostracized. But she's a warrior and she doesn't stop and she's relentless. It took me a long time to come up with the name Eve Ronin, and I worried that it might be too gimmicky, call her Eve Ronin. So I actually I didn't throw it away, but I can't remember whether it's in this book or the previous one where I mentioned that her mother, who's an actress, her given name was Eve Ronan, Ronan, but she saw a samurai movie and thought Ronan was a much cooler name, so she had her name legally changed, and Eve has been stuck with it and resents it.
Oh, great. So she's a fan of Rob's favorite movies are the Japanese, the Seven Samurai, which he truly loves. Actually, Rob and I have been to Japan and visited many of the sites of some of the great Japanese movies. There's a castle between Kyoto and Hiroshima that you can go to on the train where I think that, is it Hirakawa? Is he the guy that filmed The Seven Samurai? Do I have that right?
So.
He thinks it is too. Anyway, the whole concept of, somebody who, represents a particular archetype but wants to be an individual, like a Ronin, I think really fits Eve.
There's also a long tradition in crime fiction of conveniently named heroes like Magnum PI and Peter Gunn, T.J. Hooker. So Harry Bosch, or John Rebus, with the puzzle. It's not unusual to go that route.
No, it's not at all. But another thing I like about this series is that we're in the Calabasas, right? The Calabasas Police Department, which is not the LAPD, but then again, it's not the LAPD. And don't you live, Lee, in this area yourself?
It's actually the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, Lost Hill Station, which is in Calabasas.
Right.
Calabasas doesn't have its own police department. Neither does Malibu, neither does Lost Hills or Gura Hills. And LA has been written about in crime fiction so thoroughly and so well, by Robert Crace and Joseph Wambaugh and Michael Connelly and Raymond Chandler. I mean, what was I going to say that hasn't been said already and said better? And also all the TV shows that have been shot here. Yeah. So I purposely picked the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and the Lost Hills jurisdiction because it's a world unto itself. It is an island within the Los Angeles urban landscape that's surrounded by Los Angeles and Ventura County and all these different jurisdictions. But within Lost Hills, you've got Hidden Hills, which is a city unto itself, a walled city for the very rich. You've got Calabasas. You've got the hippy dippy Topanga Canyon. You have a rural Agoura. You have the state parks and the Malibu Canyon Creek State Park, but you also have movie studios and Paramount Ranch. And you have Malibu Beach. There's so many different environments and cultures and types of people that I realized I could write 1,000 novels set, 1,000 stories anyway, in this environment, and nobody's touched it before. It's virgin territory for me as an author, and I don't need to worry that I'm treading paths that better writers than me have already walked and thoroughly explored.
So set us in it geographically. If we start with LA, where is it? It's on a northwest axis.
It's in the northwest edge of the San Fernando Valley. It's the last place you hit in Los Angeles County before hitting Ventura County on your way up to Santa Barbara.
Okay, so it's north for sure.
It's northwest. It's
right.
Excuse me, southwest, because north is Chatsworth and Canoga Park, and the valley is actually west east, and so you're kind of going northwest when you go across the San Fernando Valley.
So if I were driving in on Interstate 10 from Phoenix, where would I go?
You'd be heading west on the 10, and then you'd head north on the 405, or you'd hit the 10 all the way west to PCH and take PCH north to Malibu Canyon or Topanga Canyon and take that over into Calabasas.
Okay. All right. I got it.
But all of Malibu is in the Lost Hills jurisdiction.
Is it?
So you've got the rich and famous who live on the beaches in Malibu and in the hills, but you've also got the rich and famous who are in the gated community of Hidden Hills, which is a city-state in and of itself. They have their own city council, their own city hall, and they have one dedicated marshal. And it's not really marshal, it's a Los Angeles County deputy.
Wow, that really is rich territory for crime fiction. I read the Wall Street Journal for the arts coverage. There's no other reason why I would actually read the Wall Street Journal, certainly the editorial department. But on Fridays, they have a section called Mansions.
Yeah, I know. I'm a subscriber too.
And I have to say that Malibu, there's other parts of LA, but it's unbelievable. The price and the excess of some of the mansions in Malibu. You think back to like princes and German, little German principalities or something. I'm telling you, these castles had nothing on these mansions in Malibu.
Have $200 million mansions in Malibu, but you also have trailers and farms and ranches all in the same community, all in the same Lost Hills jurisdiction. So it makes for, and you have beaches and you have mountains and you have desert. It's everything. So it's very rich. And for me, during the pandemic, it was very easy to write about it. I just walked out my front door. The Woolsey fire came right up to my fence here. Kobe Bryant's helicopter crashed right below my fence here. So it's a lot happens right here in Calabasas.
And zoning is just kind of a dream. We have very, what I would call loose zoning here in Scottsdale, because basically the expansion has been developers acquiring one ranch after another because this was old ranch territory. And so there's a jumble. Less so in Scottsdale than in Phoenix, but you can go from super rich enclave, as you say, to like a trailer park.
Or we've also got right in the middle of Malibu Canyon, we've got a Hindu temple. It's just an elaborate Hindu temple. The downtown of Calabasas is a fake Italian village made to look 300 years old with the world's largest, I can't remember the name of the clock now. I'm having a senior moment, but it's ridiculous. We have this ridiculous clock tower in the center of Calabasas in this fake Italian design. So it's a weird mishmash. And of course, Malibu Creek State Park, up until the late 70s, was a movie studio. They did Planet of the Apes there, Logan's Run, How Green Is My Valley, MASH, Swiss Family Robinson, Star Trek, and they still shoot movies there, but it was a dedicated studio until the late 70s.
Well,
So
yeah, your imagination could not actually conjure up all the cool stuff that you have to work with there in California. Are you a lifelong resident of this area?
no, I'm from Northern California. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. My mom was a society editor for the Oakland Tribune, and my father was an anchorman on KPIX when I was growing up.
Wow,
I think we talked about this before. But my father, he talked like this all the time, Barbara, with the same insincere smile on his face that I have right now. When my dad talked and laughed, he'd laugh like this. So you never knew if my dad genuinely found you funny. And you're laughing now because it's only been about 5 seconds. But my dad talked like this on camera and at home, just like he was on television at all times. And we'd say, Dad, try to talk like a normal person. And he'd say, Lee, I am. God, my wife, when she met him, was like, he's so insincere. No, he's just an anchor man.
So I didn't think that very often there was a migration from Northern California. I mean, you know, when I went to Stanford, it was like there was an iron wall somewhere down on Highway 1 between the Bay Area and, you know, in fact, when I was a freshman, we went down for the game between Stanford and UCLA, and Disneyland had just opened. And it was out there in orange groves. I mean, I can still remember the perfume of the orange groves. And there was nothing there. And we all
still nothing here. It's all fantasy.
Well, yeah, but we thought that, you know, nobody from San Francisco was ever going to go down to Disneyland, you know, because people from Northern California didn't go to Southern California. What happened?
Well, I came down here to go to school at UCLA. I very much wanted to be in the TV business. That's where you had to be to get into television. So I came down for UCLA, and I haven't left. But there really is, there's no actual wall, but it's like two different states. Mm-hmm. The culture, the lifestyle, I mean, everything is different in Northern California. I think if it was possible, I would have raised my family in Northern California. I think they have seasons up there and green, not so much now with the drought, but if the entertainment industry had been in San Francisco, I would have stayed up there. Got it. I miss it. But
you were the siren call of the movies.
A siren call of the movies. Yeah, that's my father's anchorman voice served me well though when I was in high school, because I put myself through college writing about the television industry for the LA Times Syndicate, the San Francisco Chronicle, Lesher Newspaper, Newsweek, all these publications. But I mostly did phone interviews. So no one knew I was 16, 17 years old. And I'd use my dad's voice. Hi, this is Lee Goldberg from San Francisco Chronicle. And, you know, that's always, I was getting away with murder. And actually, remember Steve Cannell?
Yep.
He was the first guy who kind of busted me. I had come down here to go to school, and I'd interviewed him many times over the phone. I don't know why or how I mentioned that I was in LA. And Steve said, oh, you ought to come down and interview me at Samuel Goldwyn. I'd love to finally meet you. Oh, God. He's going to see I'm 18 years, I think I was 17 or 18 years old. He's going to think I've been conning him all this time, trying to get a job with him or something. Oh, what am I going to do? So I decided I would ask him my toughest business question first thing when I walked in the door, because he had just started his own production company. He had set up shop at 71. So sure enough, I walk into his office and the look on his face was, I've been conned. So I asked him a question that cut off his balls. I can't remember what it was. And he just went like this and answered the question. And then I continued to interview him over the years for other publications I worked for. And then eventually I worked for Steve on Hunter and Cobra. And I remember I was walking down the hall at Cannell Productions, and I ran into him and he went, Lee, do we have an interview? I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I said, no, Steve, I work here. He went, what? I said, I'm a story editor on Hunter. And he actually got tears in his eyes. He said, I had no idea that you wanted to write for TV. I said, because that would have been unethical. It would have been wrong if you'd known that. It was always professional with us. And I got this job on my own, nothing having to do with you. And he gave me a hug. He brought me in his office, and we remained close friends ever since. And I asked him, what did you think when I walked in the room that time to ask you about this? I thought you were a fraud, that you came in, you've been setting me up to hit me up for a job. And then you cut off my balls. I went, oh, I got respect for this guy. And I've had respect for you ever since. And so I worked for him on 2 different series. He worked for me on Diagnosis Murder as an actor. I had him playing this pompous, burned out, cliche spewing writer producer on Diagnosis Murder. He did 4 episodes, I think, for us. It was great fun. I miss him a lot, but
Boy, I really do too. I mean, he used to fly his plane. He had 2 planes, he had the small jet and the large jet. And he took up writing crime novels by Stephen J. Cannell. Yeah. And he loved coming over here for, I think, all but his first book. And he would fly into the Scottsdale Airport. And he was the only billionaire I knew at that point. Maybe still the only billionaire I actually know. And I would go up and have lunch with him on his plane. And, then he would come down and do a thing at the bookstore. And he was a lovely guy. What was so interesting about him, aside from all of his other sterling, he was married to his 8th grade sweetheart all his life, but he was dyslexic. And I really admired somebody who had made a career out of words, out of writing and all the rest as a dyslexic. And he talked
Name's true of my brother. My brother was dyslexic.
I didn't know
his name is Todd. He used to sign his name Dot. It's so adorable. He always said because he's dyslexic. But now he's a writer, and he runs the graduate creative writing program at UC Riverside. So same thing. It was funny with Steve when he was writing his first novel, The Plan. I was working for him, and he knew I was a novelist. I think I'd done My Gun Has Bullets at that point, maybe Beyond the Beyond. And he would come into my office and read me his chapters aloud, sort of acting them out. Wow. And he was my boss, but he was also my friend. So it was kind of odd to criticize him. So we had different hats we wore. When he came into my office, he was my friend, the novelist, and we just were honest with each other. Then there were times he came to my office as the head of Stephen J. Cannell Productions. Then he was the guy I worked for. It was just, and then we were just buddies. So it's there's 3 different types of Steve when I was working for him. But once I was no longer working for him and we would run into each other on the book trail, it was great. I remember one time I was walking down the street in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Lee. And he was in some cigar shop, smoking. And he called me in. He and his chauffeur were there and, smoking cigars. And I sat with him. And we met all over the country at book festivals and things. And we'd always go out to dinner. And he always did a special thing that made other writers feel so good. Anytime he was on a panel or doing a signing with other writers, he would buy everyone's book and ask them to sign it. And he would give them copies of his book signed. Right. So I must have 8 copies of each one of his books signed to me because he never remembered that he already gave them to me. And I wasn't going to embarrass him by saying, Steve, I've already got 7 of these signed. But it was such a sweet thing for him to do.
He was really nice. He would come in and this was in the day early on when Barnes & Noble was still, a really big thing. And he would come in to meet with the local Barnes & Noble people, but he would always invite me. And I can remember at one point he asked me to, advice about his writing or some book or other. And I thought, here's a guy that's given me Maverick, like that. And, am I going to speak up and actually talk to him, critique his writing? I mean, it was totally unnerving. And it was, he was a sun worshiper. I mean, he was so proud of his gorgeous tan all the time. So was his wife. And then it was melanoma that killed him.
Yeah. Well,
and, which because he had all that hair and the melanoma, attacked his head and he couldn't see it. We lost him way too soon. He was a wonderful guy. Well, let's go back to Eve Ronan because after all, in theory, that's what we're here to talk about. So 4 books in, but she has a really interesting backstory. You've decided to make life both good and hard for her. And you had some plot threads, Lee, that you had to bring forward that at some point you were going to have to resolve, which you did in Movieland. So talk to us about the TV show and, why some of her fellow cops really hate her, et cetera.
Well, Eve Ronan is the youngest female homicide detective in the history of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And she didn't get it through experience or skill. She got it by politics. She did a viral video where she arrested a Hollywood star who was beating up a woman. And she was able to leverage that into a promotion at a time when the Sheriff's Department was riven with scandal over stuff going on in the jails and whatnot. So it worked out for her and it worked out for the Sheriff's Department, but she is disliked by all of her fellow detectives because she leapfrogged over so many people to get where she is. And while she has an expertise, innate skill, intuitive skill, she doesn't have the experience yet. And she makes lots of mistakes and steps on lots of toes because she's always trying to prove herself, not just to her colleagues and to herself, but also to the media, which kind of put her in this position. But the media is also taking advantage of her. They want to make a TV series about her life, and she feels a lot of pressure from her family to do this show and wants to control how she's portrayed. But now she's constantly having to compete with the idealized version of herself, the version of herself that she has to project to others of competence, and the real self she feels inside. And I think that's, although I've made it kind of extreme in the books, I think it's something that detectives here in Los Angeles honestly have to deal with, because LA is a giant movie studio. Yes, we have our individual movie studios, but every street here has been filmed. Everywhere here has been somewhere else. Right. And fake cops and the expectations we have based on these fake cops, the real cops feel it. Plus, even if there isn't a TV camera on them, we all have our phones aimed at them. So it's like they're on TV all the time. And they're dealing with celebrities, and they're dealing with film crews and stuff. So I think in a city that's built on fantasy, that has so many artifacts of fantasy around, like the ruins of Egypt or something, you can't deny the power of television and film when telling a story here. So I thought by having Eve's life being adapted into a TV show, it was a way to discuss those conflicts in a new and different way, and to explore something I deal with all the time in my own writing and my own career, since I divide myself between TV, film, and books. And that's kept it fresh and exciting for me. Meanwhile, Eve, the 4 books only take place over a period of about 4 months. So she's been under a lot in the last 4 months, and she's had to deal with systemic corruption within the sheriff's department, with the deputy gangs, which are now big news here in Los Angeles, and find herself in a way. And I think after this 4th book, she's a different person. If there's a 5th book, and that depends how well book number 4 does, she's going to have a different attitude towards her own health and towards investigating crime, because she realizes she cannot go on the way she's been going.
Well, I think that's true. And one of the threads that you've been developing was that while the TV series was, perhaps financially viable and whatever it is, it actually turned into a horrible liability for her, because a lawsuit arose. Yeah. And because she was met with such hostility in the department, nobody there wanted to save her. So describe what that whole controversy is.
Well, one of the earlier books, her interaction with a deputy who was involved in covering up a rape led to that deputy committing suicide. Right. So the family of that deputy is suing Eve for basically driving him to suicide. And the sheriff's department is not backing her. The sheriff's department has settled with the family and is leaving Eve out to dry. And the legal bills are more than she can afford. So she's forced to accept this TV series just so she can pay her legal bills. The last thing she wants is some big boob blonde, in leather pants on a motorcycle being the portrayal of her on television, and she has to live up to that. But she also doesn't want to deal with Hollywood because her family's been so enmeshed in it. Her father is an itinerant television director who has slept around all over the place. Her mother is a struggling actress, and she wants nothing to do with that world. But now her family's kind of pulling her back in, and the money from this show won't just pay her legal bills. It can help her sister pay off her medical school bills, help her brother get on his feet in his pool cleaning business. It could do a lot of good. So there's a seduction aspect of it too. It's sort of like getting in bed with the devil. And I just think that adds more layers and some freshness to this series that sets it apart from all the other police procedurals out there. I think something else that sets it apart is that she doesn't have a dark past. Her family wasn't killed by a serial killer. She didn't work she wasn't in the military. She doesn't have some murder or something to deal with. She just has a family like we all do, and all the baggage that comes with family. And I think that gives readers a more realistic way to empathize and emotionally invest in Eve.
I agree with that. But of course, as you point out, she has this tremendous ambition that has caused her to vault over people and really piss them off, because she doesn't have the experience she wanted to be in homicide, right? Isn't that what she vaulted into, was to become a homicide cop without putting in her time out on the streets?
Exactly.
And that's bad news. So there's a particular deputy that has been harassing her. I mean, more than one. in part of the corruption that she exposed, but one in particular. So he's been messing with her. So that's another thread that you needed to resolve. But while that's going on, she has different cases to work in each book. So give us the case that she's working in this one.
This case is inspired by a real case here in Calabasas. It's been going on for several years. There have been a series of shootings in and around Malibu Creek State Park. And for years, the sheriff's department said they're not connected. They aren't even all shootings. Some are firecrackers, some are cars backfiring. It's no big deal. You guys are overreacting. And then a father and his two kids were in the park camping, and someone shot into the tent and killed the father in front of the little kids. And it became a big scandal here. And again, the sheriff's department said they're not connected, they're not connected. And then finally admitted, yes, all the shootings are connected. And in fact, the detective who was investigating the case was fired. The captain was fired. They ended up suing the sheriff's department. It's still an ongoing nightmare. And they ended up arresting a homeless person who lived in the park for the shootings. And it hasn't come to trial yet because they're still trying to determine whether he's sane to stand trial. And there's still a lot of doubt whether he is the right person. I mean, the shootings have stopped. That doesn't mean he's necessarily the guy. And I wasn't deeply involved in that controversy, but I attended the community meetings that were held with the sheriff's department and other law enforcement agencies about this issue. I collected all the articles. I kept a close eye on it. I knew one day it would be right for an Eve Ronin novel, and it was. I mean, I am also inspired by a very real political corruption scandal going on here in Los Angeles involving developers and city council members, which has just gone to trial. And I use that as inspiration as well, kind of combined the two stories and took my own spin on it.
Isn't it sad that there's almost always a nexus between developers and city council members
Yes.
that is corrupt? I mean, that's like an almost universal truth at this point. I know S.J. Roseanne wrote a really brilliant book in her last Lydia Chin, Bill Smith book about Chinatown in New York and how that was happening there. So
I have to read that. I read all the old ones. In fact, at one point I was involved in Lifetime was interested in adapting them into a television series. And I was involved at some point in adapting it. I don't remember what happened with it, but I read all the books in the series up until that point. I really admired the way she was able to shift points of view between books.
well, the previous book, which was set in Mississippi, where you would never imagine that there was a serious Chinese presence, was amazing. And then this one, they're back in New York. That was Bill's book. Now, wait, I may be missing one. That might have been Lydia's book, and then there was a Bill book. But anyway, they're back in New York. And I didn't realize that Chinatown in New York was under so much threat from developers and some of them in the Chinese community too. I mean, not just, like evil white faces, but,
Right.
Whatever. Anyway, and we have issues like that going on here in Scottsdale, I think, which is rapidly turning into a version of Beverly Hills. I was so appalled last summer. We went to a family thing at the Del Coronado Hotel in San Diego, and then the Kellermans invited us to come and visit, and they live in Beverly Hills. And so we drove up. And as we're driving towards the Beverly Wilshire to check in, I remember driving Wilshire Boulevard in the 1960s when I was an undergraduate at Stanford and, making a trip to LA. And now it's just like all glass high rises. It looks like Shanghai. Or, there's nothing that reminds me anymore, except for the Beverly Wilshire, which is
Right.
kind of long on there, of how it used to be. And I'm thinking that is happening around me here in Scottsdale. And I really don't like it.
LA does not value anything older than 5 years. I mean,
We don't either.
we demolish it here. I mean, there are shopping malls like the Sherman Oaks Galleria that were built 20 years ago in Santa Monica Place that have been torn down and turned into something else. And I mean, there's some pieces of architecture, particularly homes that were designed by major architects, Frank Lloyd Wright and what have you. But in general, Hollywood I say Hollywood, but LA is not real good about keeping track of its history, maintaining its history. And that's a shame. On the other hand, LA history is all on film. I mean, that's what I mean about this being a backlot. We keep reshaping the backlot here, tearing down the old sets and building new ones. And up until the Woolsey fire, there were remnants of so many of these old sets still withering away in Malibu Creek State Park and Paramount Ranch, and they burned away because of the Woolsey fire. And the development issues you're talking about, that they're rampant here in Calabasas and Malibu, and also the whole conflict between civilization and wildlife. We're building the world's largest wildlife overpass here in Calabasas. There's the largest in the world, just so our mountain lions are not trapped here inbreeding. So it's an interesting place to live, and there's so much to write about. I'm hoping the Movieland does well enough to lead to a 5th book and a 6th and 7th, because Eve Ronan has so much room to grow, and I love writing her. And I love the idea of writing 2 books a year. One's an Eve Ronan and one is something else. I think that would keep me fresh and keep me happy.
Well, I mean, you are, as I said before, protean, but you're also prolific. So, writing 2 books a year might daunt a lot of people, but not going to daunt.
I've been writing 2 books a year for over a decade. And before that, I was writing 3 or 4 books a year. When I was doing the Monk and Diagnosis Murder books, I was writing a new one every 90 days while still producing a TV show. But I have a new book coming out in June of 2023, and possibly a book coming shortly before that or shortly after. They haven't quite scheduled it. So I'll have a busy year next year in terms of releases. I don't know when a 5th Eve Ronan might happen. It might happen towards the end of 2023 if this one does well. They'll know pretty soon.
Right. And additionally, you actually got a little publishing operation going.
Yes.
Do you still have Brash Books going on?
Oh, yeah. And it's horrible to say, but the pandemic was a boon for us. We had our best years ever during the pandemic. People discovered books, and Brash is just going strong. It used to be my very expensive habit, my wife called her, very expensive hobby, I should say. And now it's actually, it's always been cash flow positive, but now I'm able to make some money off of it, which has been nice. Not just my authors who are making money, but it's been a real thrill. It's been a way to monetize my love of old mysteries, be able to bring back into print books I love. But I would say now 50% of our titles are brand new books that have never been published before. And it feels so good to see writers that we've discovered getting starred reviews in PW and having their first books published. It feels great. It feels like I'm giving back to an industry that's given me so much.
So are you involved in the acquisitions?
I am the acquisitions. I must get 8 or 9 submissions a day. And Joel Goldman and I read every single one of them. And if we like the first 25 pages, we ask for the manuscript. And if Joel and I both like the manuscript, then we publish it. But if one of us doesn't like it, that's it. It's a veto. We both have to be wildly enthusiastic about it. And the reprints have been doing great for us, and it's great to see books that people have forgotten about getting back into print, especially the Ralph Dennis books, the Hardman novels. That's been really great to resurrect that series, but also to publish all of his unpublished books. That's been wonderful. And to see them get so well reviewed and to get so much press attention and Hollywood attention. I can't mention who it is, but some big name people option the books. So it's like, God, we might get a movie out of it too. So it's been wonderful.
Well, I'm really delighted to hear that. I think it was very brave of you to take that on. And I thought it was, as your wife said, an expensive hobby, but how nice that it's turned into something. So can you publish yourself?
No, I won't do that. I don't want my authors ever thinking they're competing with me for marketing dollars or marketing time. Brash Books will never publish anything by me or Joel.
Okay.
It's always going to be a standalone thing. It's not a vanity press. It's a real publishing company. And I'm surprised and gratified by how many stores we're finally getting into. When we did the Ralph Dennis books, there were a lot of stores in North Carolina and in Georgia that wanted to carry the books because he was a local author in both communities. And that was nice. They keep reordering them. So that makes me feel good. So that's been very nice. It's been a real great experience doing Brash Books. Now, granted, it's hard too. I mean, I would say 99.9% of the stuff that's submitted to us is just atrocious, painful to read. And I take no joy in having to reject those books. But God, when you find something good, it is so exciting. It's what I feel as excited, maybe more excited when I get the box of books from a new author that we're publishing than I do when I get my own books. It just feels so good. I'm so happy for them. I just feel so much pride in publishing those books. Well, you know how it is with your own press. It's the same
Well,
thing.
we did before we sold it. And I still work with some of my authors, even though I'm not officially, editing their books anymore. But yeah, and I really miss it. But I ran out of time to do everything that I was doing. And so I'm happy focused on the bookstore at the moment, and they're better off with a bigger company. But yeah, it was 20 years, and really I'm very proud of the books we brought in. There's a current book out called The Woman in the Library that's doing extremely well, which is one of the last books that I worked on with the author. Is dedicated to me, which I
That's sweet.
find a great compliment. So it's great, it's great to see that's happened. So what's going on with your TV or movie stuff in
A lot
addition
of
to your
stuff.
writing books?
A lot of stuff. I have a TV series on Hallmark called Mystery 101 that I co-created with Robin Bernheim. We've done 8 movies. Don't know yet whether there'll be a ninth, but we'll see. And I adapted Victor Gischler's book, Gun Monkeys. Remember way back when it was Edgar?
Boy, a long time ago.
Yes,
Yeah.
it just finished shooting with Pierce Brosnan starring and James Caan and
Wow.
Monica Baccarin. And so I wrote the script for that. And True Fiction has been optioned by ABC for a TV series. I can't tell you who's involved. I've signed a non-disclosure agreement,
I
but
really like True Fiction. I thought that was a lot of fun.
yeah, and I have high hopes because the people who are doing True Fiction are really, really talented, and I have high hopes for it. Lost Hills was developed the season before last for CBS as a pilot. They ultimately didn't go forward with it, but now it's back out, and it looks like we may find another home for it very soon. It was funny because
will that be an incentive to publish more of them?
I don't know. I mean, the fact that ABC is developing a True Fiction TV series has not let Amazon Publishing to do more Ian Ludlow books at this point. I think if the TV series happens, then yes, I'll do a 4th Ian Ludlow novel. But I mean, it certainly couldn't hurt if there's an Eve Ronin TV series.
No, not at all. Why is it that you are sort of fixed on Movieland having to quote do well, or there won't be?
Well, it's true of all the books. I mean, the future of Eve Ronin is always book to book. It's whether or not the books hold up the sales of the previous books, and I mean, it's a business when you get down to it. So, whatever the metrics are for the publisher to decide whether it makes sense to do a 5th or not. I think the odds are we'll be doing a 5th. But we don't know until a book comes out and we see how it performs.
I thought that, many authors get 2 or 3 book contracts. So
yeah, I'm at the end of my current multi-book contract.
Okay.
I just delivered a standalone thriller that's not Eve Ronin, but it's actually set in the same universe. It's called Malibu Burning, and it's about a heist in the middle of the largest wildfire in Los Angeles history, and the arson investigators and the crooks. It's a parallel storyline. I've been working on it for quite some time, and that'll be out in June of 2023. But that was the last book in my current contract. So they could come tomorrow and say, yes, we want 3 more books from you, and we'd like one of them to be an Eve Ronin. I don't know. They could come back and say, we want a second Malibu Burning, with those arson investigators and that crook. Who knows? I'm always in this position anytime a contract runs out. You don't know what the.
Well, no, I agree with you. That's true. I mean, it's a little hard on readers when they get invested in a particular character, and then all of a sudden. I mean, when I read this Eve Ronin, and I saw that you wrapped up a number of things that you'd been pulling along from the beginning, I wondered if you were getting ready to wind her up. Or at least you're leaving her in a good place. Let's put it that way.
I mean, because I knew my contract was up, I was leaving her in a good place in case they decided we don't want to do more. But if they do want to do more, it's perfect for me because I intend to move her forward. This is a certain period in her life. There'll be a time jump. I might take into account the pandemic and say it's been 2 years or something, and see her in a different place with not different place. She'll still be here, but mentally in a different place in the department too, because she won't be carrying quite the same baggage she had before, and she'll have that experience and trying to lead her life differently. And plus the TV series will be in a different place too. Maybe it'll be on the air at this point. And she'll come into this money, and what does she do with the money? So, to be honest with you, I've already written the proposal for the next Eve Ronin. So when the time comes that we start negotiating the new contract, I'll be submitting that proposal. And I don't think I'm going to be up in the air long about whether or not there's another Eve Ronin. The book just came out yesterday.
I know,
And
which is why we're talking
yeah,
today. It's
so
actually-
I think they'll know in a few weeks whether they want to do another Eve Ronin. If they do, then we'll be able to have the fifth Eve Ronin come out in 2023. So there'll still be one book a year.
Sure. Well, but I mean, I think you raised an important point, which is that, at least in my view, you can't drag out some plot lines too long.
Yeah.
And we were watching, there's a really interesting, there's a lot of good French crime television.
Oh yeah, my wife's French, so I see a lot of it.
Man, MHC TV, and there's a really good one called Balthazar,
Yeah.
in which he's this unusual medical examiner, coroner, whatever you want to call it. But they have been developing from the beginning, where I think just ended season 2, if I remember right. There are 2 more seasons, which I haven't watched yet. But in any case, they've been dragging along this whole trope about his murdered girlfriend and who's responsible and so forth. And it looked like, and they should have, in my view, wrapped it up at the end of season 2. And my husband and I were both really annoyed when they didn't. It looked like it was going to finally, because it was time to move on. We've done this now for 16 or 20 episodes or something, and enough already.
Well,
But
for 4 books, I've been teasing out Duncan's retirement. Even though the books only span about 4 or 5 months, still, I need to resolve that. I think it's time to resolve the deputy thing. I want to resolve a lot of stuff for exactly the reasons you said. And I feel that if Eve hasn't learned from what she's been through in 4 books, then it's going to be boring. I mean, she's been through this physically and emotionally and all this stuff. I want her to take what she's learned and take the next step and make new mistakes and find out new aspects of herself. And frankly, I want to be challenged as a writer. I want to see her develop. I want to do new things with her. So wrapping so much of that up gives me the space to say, okay, now I can move forward. And in book number 5, I don't need to give all this backstory about her.
That's very true. And, I agree with you. I think it's lazy writing. That was my objection to Patricia Cornwell bringing back the same serial killer for either 2 or 3 books. And then, my God, he showed up as a ghost in, I think it was book 4 or 5 or something. And I thought, come on, it's time. I find that to be really irritating.
Well, even, I was doing those Fox and O'Hare books with Janet, and in book 5, we brought their romance. They were in bed together, the 2 leads. I mean, in the 5 books, there was an evolution to their relationship, an evolution to the romance, an evolution to the way they solved crimes, the way they did heists, her evolution as an FBI agent, how she changed, his evolution as a crook and how he changed. And for me, one of the reasons I thought it was time for me to stop is I thought I got them in a good place in book 5.
Yeah.
That we had, if Fox and O'Hare went on, it had to go on in a different way, that they had to move their relationship forward. And I haven't read the books that have followed the ones I did with Janet, but it felt good to me that it had an arc. It wasn't the same book every single time, that it moved the story and the characters forward. And one of the things I really admire about the Harry Bosch series is he has evolved Harry in so many ways over the course of all these books. I don't know how Rex Stout could write the same Nero Wolfe for 50 years. I remember I adapted Nero Wolfe for television. So I read all those books and adapted them. And he was the same Archie and Nero in 1945 as they were in 1975. They hadn't aged, but the world had changed. You had Hitler back then and Nixon now. And it's like, or Travis McGee never changed. And in some ways, towards the end of Robert B. Parker doing Spencer, it also felt like he wasn't changing. Ace Atkins has moved Spencer along. I think it's important for characters to evolve, not to evolve out of the franchise. You don't want to jump the shark. But I think now today's readers and today's viewers want to see an evolution, even if it's minimal. They want to see the characters learning from their past mistakes and their past experiences.
Well, I think you're right for the most part, but I also think there are readers who really like the comfort of always jumping back into, what they expect. So, for every author, it's different. For you, I think challenging yourself and challenging the reader is an integral part of why you do what you do. And, the fact that you are able to move around into so many different universes and so forth, your life is a constant kaleidoscope of change, your creative life. And obviously that's what keeps you going.
I admire Michael Connelly's career, that he has been able to write so many different, he has Bosch, but he's got the Lincoln Lawyer. He's got Renee Ballard. He has the standalone thrillers. Not even mentioning the TV, but he's got all the TV stuff going too.
Right. And I really like the Lincoln Lawyer television. I think, I thought the McConaughey movie was really good, but I like this new guy.
I haven't seen it yet. My wife tells me it's wonderful.
I really like it. And I won't reveal what it is because that's a spoiler, but one of the genius parts in it, and it's more visibly in the television than it would be if you were reading the book, is that the answer to the real question of how the crime was committed was right there in front of you in the television. And it would be much harder to do that. I can't even remember because it's been forever since I read the original books. I can't remember whether that was what happened in the book or not, but I thought the genius of the television was he put it right there in plain sight, right there, and then it's like when you finally realize,
I've done that in TV shows that I've done, when we were doing Diagnosis Murder, what have you, you have, or Monk even, you have the clue right in front of the viewer, but you keep distracting them. You tell the viewer it's all about the time. You keep focusing on the time when the murder occurred. Where was everybody at this particular time? The thing about a television mystery or even a book mystery is it's a story, but it's also a magic trick. And a magic trick is all about misdirection. Yeah. So if you were playing honestly with your reader, all the clues have to be there, but you have to distract them from it. All the clues in the Eve Ronan novels are right there. You can go back and reread the book, and the clues are right there. But I'm doing my damnedest to get you to look over here. Don't look here. Look over there. And we do it on television all the time.
Act. I think that's why Christie has remained so popular. She was a particularly adept musician. So why don't we call Patrick up to see if there are any questions or comments from the audience? He's probably so dazzled by our discussion, he's speechless.
No, there are some questions coming in.
I'll take a drink here.
Let's see here.
This is Diet Coke, trust me.
Okay. Let's see. Christina wants to know, she says, Lee, what do your neighbors and fellow, would it be Calabasians? What do they think of the series? Do you have any sense that?
They love it. I mean, I hear from city council members, I hear from neighbors. They just love that Calabasas is in a book and that I'm using actual places they've been to, places they eat. What's interesting, though, is the Lost Hills station doesn't cooperate with me at all. They don't want. They've done everything they can to block me, even on stuff that's in the public domain, like what is your jurisdiction? What is the actual jurisdictional map and stuff? I've had to go to the city council or my local county supervisor to get them to get the information for me. And so I get no help whatsoever from Lost Hills Station. So I've had to make up what the station looks like inside. However, I have heard from Calabasas City Council members and city manager at Hidden Hills and other places, people who've gone into the Lost Hills Station and talked to the captain's new now, but the then captain. He has my books on his back shelf, or he had my books on his back shelf. So they're very much aware of what I'm doing. And I've had deputies email me saying, God, it's uncanny how accurate you get it. So that's been nice. But no, Calabasas likes it, at least from what I can tell. The Lost Hills and Gated Prey had their launch at the Calabasas Library. And so I had a packed house of locals there, and they would just eat it up.
I know Mike Connolly has a couple of homicide detectives that are friends of his, actually quite a few, but there are a couple that have been, really great sources for him over the last few decades. Do you have any kind of contacts, police contacts?
I do. Some you'll recognize. Paul Bishop and Robin Bursell have been extraordinarily helpful to me. So is David Putnam. David Putnam's ex-wife, Pamela Sokolick Putnam, is a deputy coroner investigator in the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. She's been a huge help to me. And every year, once or twice a year, I attend a homicide investigators training conference in Wisconsin that's not open to the public. It's only open to law enforcement professionals. And the thing is, the guy who runs the program is a friend of mine, and he gets me in. So I make so many contacts at those homicide investigator training conferences. Plus, I learn about so many cases and get so much good information. Lost Hills, the case behind Lost Hills, is inspired by something I learned at that homicide investigators training conference. And without doing any spoilers, the subplot that Barbara liked so much in Gated Prey, I learned about at that homicide investigators conference. And I've never heard of a crime like this before. And I was able to talk to the investigators who handled that crime and was able to fashion it into something I could use in my own book. So I have lots of cops I talk to. I get lots of feedback. And many of them don't want to be acknowledged in my book and don't want their name used.
Sure. Let's see. Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask you this one. Stefania, our friend from Italy, she wants to know, what is that interesting looking mask thing on the door behind you?
Well, she should know. I got it in Venice. It's just a mask I got last time I was there, from one of the, some famous vendor of masks. I can't remember. My wife found it in a French guidebook. So we got that mask there.
Let's see.
And otherwise, that painting is the cover from all my vigilante novels. Back in the day when they had painted covers, all they would do is change the bottom portion to match the story, and the rest, stayed the same for each book. This is before, graphics, computer graphics and all that. So I bought the painting. But underneath the women there is, 4 other books. They just painted over it.
That's really
that ties me to my past, and that's my chair from when I was the executive producer of Diagnosis Murder. I have all kinds of stuff.
Memorabilia in your office?
I'm sorry?
Memorabilia.
Yes, because I often sit here thinking I'm a complete fraud. This book is a piece of crap. I'm going to lose my contract. I'm not going to be published again. And every now and then it's necessary for me to look up at my book covers or look at my credits and remind myself, I've been in this position before. You're going to get through it, Lee. Relax. But the other voice is saying they just didn't see through you then.
Well,
now I know you write.
Brain wall can be very helpful. No kidding.
I was just going to ask. I know we're obviously longtime friends with you and your brother. Have you guys? You write very differently, but it would be fun to see a Lee and Todd collaboration. Do you think it could work?
No. Todd and I collaborate obviously very easily. I've collaborated with Janet for 5 books, and we had enormous fun doing it. I did a series of books called The Dead Man, 25 of them with different writers. Obviously in television, I collaborate. But Todd has a very different voice than me. He aims to be more literary. I aim to be more mass market. And while we have a very similar sense of humor and a very similar taste in crime fiction, we have very different writing styles. I've told him that there's no book he's written where I couldn't cut 10,000 words and make it better. And then there are times where he thinks I skate over emotional bits and depth and stuff. But he and I are great at speaking together. When I say speaking, doing events together. We're both on a stage or doing signings. We have a good shtick. We do well together when we're at public events. And we talk all the time. I bounce plot problems off of him and vice versa. If I am struggling with something at 2 a.m, I can text him and he's struggling with something too. We're the same sort of biorhythms as well. We both do our best writing between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m.
Really? Wow. Have any clowns mysteriously made their way into your work?
No, but it's funny how interesting things in our lives we have to take dibs on. I don't know if I've told this story before. It's a sad story, but also a funny story. And it actually kind of underlines my belief that even in the worst, most tragic times, there's always humor, which is why my books and Todd's books always have humor in them, no matter how dark the world is we're writing about. When my mom was dying, she lived here in Los Angeles, and I was told by doctors, you got to get the family here right away. She's not going to make it through the day. So we got the whole family here. We're all gathered around her bed at the hospital, and she passed away very peacefully with all of us around her. It's the perfect way to go. And the chaplain from the hospital comes in, and he says, would you like me to say a few words for your mother? Now, we're not a religious family. We're Jewish or we're atheist, but my sister likes to hedge her religious bets. So she said, sure, we'd appreciate you saying a few words over our mom. So he gave a very nice blessing, whatever you call it, for our mom. And when he was done, he said, what did you think? And my sister said, it was very sweet, very thoughtful. Thank you. And he went, yes, 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 yes. And he starts doing this victory dance at the foot of my mother's deathbed. And we're all staring at him. He goes, oh, excuse me. I've been on a sabbatical for 6 months. I thought I lost my mojo, but I've still got it. You've been great. Sorry for your loss. Anything more I can do? I'm downstairs in the chapel. See ya. And we just burst out laughing. I mean, my mom would have loved it. None of us would have believed it. The whole family wasn't there. And the first thing Todd said was, I have dibs on this. He's going to write about it if he hasn't already. So we have some funny things in our lives that we as a family of writers take dibs on, that Todd and I fight over who gets to write about it. Like there was a bar that Todd and I stumbled upon called Poor Decisions, P-O-U-R Decisions. I said, I have dibs. And it's in a book of mine that's coming out next year. So we do that all the time.
But collaborating would just not work, huh?
I just don't think. I'll give you another example. I wrote a short story called Jack Webb's Star for a collection that Robert Randisi did called Hollywood and Crime. And Michael Connelly was in that anthology as well. And I was not a short story writer. Todd is. And I showed him the short story and he said, Lee, if you were one of my students, I would flunk you. This is an atrocious piece of shit. You cannot send this to anybody. It's going to ruin your reputation. I said, well, can you be a little more specific? And he gave me some notes, about 5% of which I agree with. And I did a rewrite and I sent it to him. He said, I would give you a D-. It is still horrible. You cannot send this to Bob. So I sent it to Bob. Bob loved it. And Todd said, Bob doesn't know anything. You can't let him publish this. Make a long story short, the book came out. PW said, great anthology. The standouts are Michael Connelly's story and Lee Goldberg's Jack Webb Star. Todd said, well, PW doesn't know shit. The LA Times did a review. So every single critic said the same thing.
Just,
best two stories.
Balls, though.
So I finally said to Todd, you don't understand how I write. And we have two different voices. And I can't write your boring literary stuff. And you can't write my funny, over the top stuff. It's two different ways of telling stories. I just worry that sometimes you're cutting off your students who might be writing something that you may not, quite get.
Have you been a guest speaker in his classes?
No, no, it's not because he doesn't want me. It's because of UC rules involving nepotism and all that kind of thing. When he wasn't running his own graduate creative writing program and he was just teaching at UCLA Extension, yes, I was a guest at his classes. But I've gone down there to be a guest listening to people speak. He's had great speakers in his classes.
Yeah. By the way, Robin Bursell mysteriously has appeared in the comments.
She must have heard that we were talking about her
Smiley
earlier.
face. Yeah. Hey, Robin. Let's see.
We were talking about how you're the hottest writer in crime fiction, Robin, especially when you're carrying a gun.
Okay, a question about, let's see, your work as a publisher. Has it had an influence on you as a writer? I don't know.
Yes. In fact, I meant to say that when Barbara was asking me about it. Being a publisher and having to give writers notes on their books has made me think more about my own craft and why I do what I do. Because I have to articulate to a writer why I think their hero is too passive, why I think the hero is not driving the story, why I think there's not enough conflict, or why a scene needs to reveal character and move the story forward, or it should be cut. And having to convey my theories about what makes a good scene or a good book or a good mystery, and talking about why a particular scene doesn't work or how to fix their plot. I have often found that I have a plot problem I can't fix in my own book. Trying to help another writer fix theirs gives me the key to fixing mine. And I sometimes learn something by having to articulate this stuff and to work through a plot problem for another writer. So no, it's been very helpful. And it also forces me to look at writing in a new way too, because I'm seeing different voices. Brash is publishing a book in July called The Lemon Man, a first novel by an Irish writer about a hitman with OCD who ends up taking care of an infant and how it destroys his life. It's wonderful. And this guy has such a fresh and different voice, and his balance of grit with the OCD and with the violence. And it's really wonderful. And that just makes me feel so good. And it enhances my own writing. I think to be a good writer, you've got to read. You can't just be in a bubble. You've got to see how other people are applying the craft. And reading good books is just as helpful as reading bad books. We get so many god-awful submissions at Brash, and the god-awful stuff actually helps me as well, because sometimes I'll see things I'm guilty of. It's like, oh, I got to pull this crap from my book too.
It was great that you guys brought back the John Sanford, not Sandford
Yes.
books. Are you going to be doing some more of those?
Yes. I think we just released the last one we have rights to. We've done 3 of them. I think all the others are now in print with various other independent publishers. But it's funny, people will order the book saying, you tried to rip me off. You're pretending to be John Sanford. No, this guy was around long before John Sanford. And we say he's dead. And we'd say it's a reprint. We're not in any way trying to, ride on John Sanford's back. But still, people get mad at us sometimes because they make the mistake thinking it's a new Lucas Davenport novel.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, it's true that, when you have names that are too similar, you can certainly run into all kinds of other difficulties.
There's also a difference between Sandford and Sanford. One's got a D and one doesn't. And
right. No, I get it. But fascinating stuff. Anything else, Patrick, before we wrap up?
Yeah, Todd is checking in. He says, I'm checking on any Todd slander that might be happening. And
you're too late, Todd. You should have.
You should have your attorney review.
That's right.
Entire video, Todd.
Absolutely true. Right. Hey, Lee, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for being flexible about the date. And as always, I feel like I've learned so much from. And it was great to go back and think about, Stephen Cannell and whatever, and to hear about Brash books. It's been a fascinating conversation.
And let's not forget slandering my brother.
Well, that part I'm leaving up to your family thing. But anyway, it's been terrific. Thank you so very much. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And we do have copies of Movieland. We're down to just a few autographed ones. But I would also point out that while this is the hardcover, it comes in a trade paperback as well. So that's available in any quantity that you wish. So we're very pleased. I really like this series and urge you to try it. It's only 4 books, so start with Lost Hills and read your way forward. And Gracie, if you're listening to me, let's talk about a 5th book, right? Okay.
Use your influence, Barbara. Thank you.
You bet.